But you don't want to call in and talk about that for a good faith conversation. You seem to be upset because there was a moment that Democrats didn't stand up and clap. Did you have a problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene? Did you have a problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert when they were screaming at Joe Biden during his speech? Did you have a problem with them?
Was that disrespectful?
When Joe Biden was...
Welcome back, everyone. Good to have you here. So what we are looking at today is a live radio call-in that genuinely got out of hand in the best possible way. A caller named David phones in, wanting to talk about why Democrats wouldn't stand during a State of the Union moment honoring a victim, and the host is not having it. What starts as a simple political disagreement turns into the host pulling up David's entire track record on air and forcing him to answer for it in real time. And David? He was not ready for where this conversation went. Stay with this one all the way through because the last few minutes are where things completely flip, and you will want to see exactly how it lands. Also, drop a comment letting me know where in the world you are watching from right now. I genuinely love seeing where this community comes from, so don't be shy. All right, let's get into it.
Because, you know, I know how important it is for you to, for people that stand up and clap. I know that's very important to you. So I'm standing up right now.
And honor a dead woman?
No, I'm standing up and I'm honoring
a woman that was murdered.
I'm honoring a Trump mushroom gobbler. No,
murdered.
I'm honoring you.
And I choose to stay seated.
No. I'm honoring a Trump mushroom gobbler.
And I'm not. And I'm not standing.
I'm not standing up for Donald Trump. I'm standing up for you, and I'm clapping. Thank you, David, for admitting that you voted for a complete imbecile. I appreciate that.
At yesterday's, State of the Union speech, when Trump brought up Irina Zarutska, the woman that was killed by that animal, and then he started to basically honor her and her mother. And I noticed a lot of Democrats didn't stand or seem to honor her. Do you have any opinion as to why they didn't do that?
First of all, I haven't interviewed anybody that was there in the room, so obviously the answer would be no. But I would also say, as I pointed out, a lie, talking about the person who committed this heinous crime, claiming that he wasn't born in this country, that he was an immigrant. Right. Are you okay with that? Maybe the start of the conversation was a lie instead of talking about this horrible victim and this horrible crime.
I'm not okay with that, but I mean, why do you? So you don't have any opinion as to why they didn't?
I think I'll say, David. I'll give you my opinion. My opinion is.
Okay, sure.
The reason they didn't stand is because the background political implication is that the Democrats are allowing open borders and allowing all these people to come in. The guy has been here for years and years. It was a random attack.
He was born in Carolina.
So David, they didn't stand because let me just finish. They didn't stand because they have no respect for the fact that Trump is trying to use his tragedy as a political launching point for his facts that weren't facts at all. They were just lies.
So I'll answer that too. So I'll answer that too.
Yes, it was. He
politicized.
So
hold on. Okay. Again, I gave you the crime numbers, so that's irrelevant. But let me give you my answer. Yes, I did. I spoke about it earlier today. It's not my fault if you weren't paying attention. But let me answer your question now after Leonard just did.
Sure.
Let me be very clear. If I was in that room, which I wouldn't have been, I've said from the beginning, I don't think any Democrats should have been in there and given him any respect at all. I would never stand up and clap for anything that man does or anything that man says. And it's not because I have something that you guys like to use as Trump derangement syndrome. I think the deranged people are the people that stand up and clap when he brags about how many people he took off of.
A woman who was murdered.
No, I would honor the. Excuse me. I'll tell you what I think is. I'll tell you what I think. I'll tell you what I think is deranged. When you use victims to try to score political points. Example.
And that's why they didn't stand.
Example.
That's not why.
Example. Okay, so first of all,
stand because they don't.
Okay, so let me finish here. For you to make the statement, which I think is absolutely despicable, to say that Democrats in there that didn't stand don't care that this woman was brutally well, then you're an idiot for making a statement like that. You're an idiot, and every single time you call, no, you are. No, yeah, you're reading. Okay, well, I'm reading your phone call, and the only crimes that you seem to have a problem with in this country are crimes that are committed by brown people. Every time you call into the show, you talk about undocumented. You talk about no. Let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. No. Here's what I said. Here's what I said. You're not listening. I need you to pay attention.
What most people miss in a conversation like this is that the real argument never gets to start because the foundation it was built on was already cracked before the first sentence was finished. And that is exactly what you are watching here. David calls in with what sounds like a simple emotional point. Why didn't they stand? Why didn't they show respect? And for a lot of people watching, That question feels reasonable on the surface. But here is what you have to understand. The host does not take the bait. He goes straight to the source. He points out that the story being told to an entire country began with something factually wrong. The host said this, a lie, talking about the person who committed this heinous crime, claiming he wasn't born in this country, that he was an immigrant. That is not a small detail. That is the entire premise. Because when you demand an emotional response from people, when you say, stand up, they show respect, honor this moment, and in the moment itself was introduced through misinformation, you are not asking people to grieve. You are asking them to co-sign a false narrative, and those are two completely different things. The host then lays it out directly. He said they didn't stand because the tragedy was being used as a political launching point, and the facts weren't facts at all. They were lies. Think about that framing. Refusing to participate in something built on false information is not cold. It is actually the more principled position. Then David goes somewhere that genuinely crosses a line in this conversation. He implies that the people who didn't stand simply do not care about the victim, and the host fires back immediately, calling that framing absolutely despicable. And he is right too, because that move, taking someone's refusal to clap and turning it into a moral verdict about whether they care about a victim, that is emotional manipulation. It is not analysis. It is not debate. It is a pressure tactic. And when someone finally names it out loud, David's only response is to get louder, not sharper, not more specific, just louder. And that tells you more than anything he actually said.
Sure.
When you call into this show, you always talk about
Right.
undocumented immigrants and you talk about brown people.
didn't
I
bring that
care
up
about,
today.
okay, yeah, but you call people animals and you only seem to,
Yeah, maybe because
you only seem to, the point I'm trying to make, sir, is that
Yeah.
every time you call in, you always seem to talk about victims of brown people that commit heinous crimes. I'm waiting for you to call in and talk about maybe a MAGA supporter or a white supremacist that commits a crime. I'm waiting for the day that David calls in and says, gosh, that Trump supporter or that white supremacist.
There's plenty.
Yeah, but I never in the history of this
I'll
show
answer that
have
question.
ever heard
I'll
you do
explain
that before. I've never heard you do that
Let me
before.
explain.
And let me
I'm
tell you
talking
something.
about
Let
what
me be
was
clear.
explained at the State of the Union.
I wouldn't stand up and clap for anything that man does or says. Do you want to know why? It's no disrespect to the family of the heinous
Yes.
crime that was, okay, well,
Yes, it is.
guess what? That's your opinion, okay? But you
Of
won't
course
call,
it's my
that's
opinion.
your
It's
opinion.
based on
Guess
logic.
what? I'm not going to,
It's
no.
disrespectful to the mother of the dead.
Okay,
boy who
so
was murdered.
let's talk about disrespect.
No, it's not.
Let's
It's
talk
disrespectful
about,
to
let's
make it
talk
political.
about disrespect. You want to preach to me about disrespect? The second this story started, when he brought it up, he said it was from an undocumented immigrant. Don't you think that?
He was
Don't
wrong.
you
His
think?
information
Oh,
was wrong. I'm
is
not
that
disputing
is that disrespectful to all undocumented immigrants or brown people in this country? But you don't seem to care about that. Was it
What do you
disrespectful?
mean I don't care? I told you he was wrong, and
He was
I don't
wrong.
think he did that
Okay.
intentionally. He just wasn't
So
getting
I've
the
told
proper
you,
information.
I've been very clear to you in this phone call. I would never stand up
Right.
and clap for
I didn't ask
anything
you would.
Donald
I get
Trump
that you
does
would.
or
That's great. I'm
says.
asking about the
So,
Democrats, Brian.
so instead of criticizing people in the room, this is what's amazing, David, with respect about this conversation. I listed
Right.
dozens of things that Donald Trump said. And by the way, there's more than that. And I had the receipts and the facts to back up all the lies that Donald Trump said last night. But you don't want to call in and talk about that for a good faith conversation. You seem to be upset because there was a moment that Democrats didn't stand up and clap. Did you have a problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene? Did you have a problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert when they were screaming at Joe Biden during his speech? Did you have a problem with them?
Was that
decked out?
disrespectful?
When Joe Biden was,
Look,
was
of
it?
course, they were. Those two were complete fools and idiots for that. I
Why didn't you
completely
call
agree
into
with
my?
you.
Why didn't you call into my show and complain about that when it happened? Why didn't? Well, I bet you didn't call into any shows and complain about that, did you? But when Democrats don't stand up, that's when you have a
I
problem.
to complain to you about every.
No.
that happens
You
anywhere.
never complained once on this show. You never called in and complained
That's
about
not true.
anything like that.
Okay, well, David, you got your explanation, okay? The explanation is that Trump was trying to use it for political gain, and they were not going to play his game. That's what happened. You know why?
This is where the conversation stops being about one moment and becomes about something much bigger, because the host does not just respond to what David said, he responds to the pattern of what David has always said, and that shift changes everything. Here is the point that landed hardest. The host said this: "Every single time you call in, you always seem to talk about victims of crimes committed by brown people." Yeah, and then he added something even sharper. He said he is waiting for the day David calls in about a white supremacist or a MAGA supporter who committed a crime. He said he has never once heard it, not a single time in the entire history of the show. Now stop and think about that for a second. If someone's outrage was genuinely about crime, about victims, about safety, about justice, the background of the person committing the act would not determine whether they pick up the phone. They would call in about all of it. The fact that there is a clear and consistent pattern of what triggers the outrage and what does not. That is not concern for victims. That is a filter, and filters reveal preferences. David tries to pivot and bring disrespect back into the conversation, and the host comes back with something sharp. He said, "You want to preach to me about disrespect?" And then he immediately pointed out that the story was introduced with wrong information, and asked whether spreading that kind of information was disrespectful to an entire community of people being falsely associated. David admits he was wrong about it, but here's the thing. He brushes past it in about 3 seconds. Wrong about it? Sure. Moving on. And that double standard is the whole argument. Because when the other side makes a factual error in front of millions of people, it barely registers, but when someone stays seated for 30 seconds, that is the national conversation. That gap right there, that is what the host is actually exposing. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert come up. And David admits without hesitation, complete fools and idiots, his words, which means the standard exists. David knows what disrespect looks like. He just never applied it consistently. And the host catches it in real time.
Because they were too smart.
All right,
they were smarter than him.
I agree with you. I'm going to do a test with David Leonard right now because me and Leonard talked about this earlier. David, since we're talking about people standing up and sitting down, which is, by the way, not that important to me in the grand scheme of things. Apparently, it's more important to you, but that's okay. But that's okay.
Well, you have a right to stand or not
okay.
stand.
That's okay. So David doesn't seem to understand that they weren't not standing up in honoring a woman who was brutally murdered. They weren't standing up because they don't want to respect Donald Trump, but that's okay. So when Donald Trump bragged about 2.1 million people that are off of food stamps, we know a large portion of those people are people that desperately need it. And every single Republican in that room got up and started clapping. Would you say that's disrespectful to people in this country, some of whom that are struggling to make ends meet and now they don't have food stamps? Was that disrespectful?
To the people who are getting off SNAP? Yeah, I would say to a certain extent it is, sure.
To a certain extent.
All of them were disrespectful to a certain extent for disrespecting people who need food assistance who are now hungry. And that was okay.
Yeah, it's disrespecting. If you're taking it away from them and it shouldn't be taken away, sure, that's a form of disrespect.
That's what happened.
I think you're assuming that I'm agreeing with every. Look, for what it's worth, most of the State of the Union with Trump, he was wrong about most things that he said. I knew you wouldn't want to mention how Democrats wouldn't want to stand up for so many.
What are you talking? We not only mentioned it, we defined it. I took a position, and Brian took a position on it.
First of all,
what more do you want?
I said David didn't listen to the start of the program.
We took a position.
Hold on. David didn't listen to the start of the show, or either that or he chose not to. David, I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning of the show when I criticized Democrats. Clearly, you either didn't. Did you listen to the beginning of the show?
Look, I may have missed it.
You may have missed it. You may have missed it. Okay, so
mistake.
It's okay. You made an assumption, which I get from people who support Trump all the time. First of all, I didn't think any Democrats should have been in there. I thought they all shouldn't have been in there. If you're just going to sit there and you're going to make faces, it's better that you're not there at all. That's number one. Number two, I've criticized the Democrats, not for not standing up, but I criticized the Democrats like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who were screaming in the middle of Donald Trump's speech that I don't personally believe moves the ball forward and helps in any way. And I also, to an extent, criticized Al Green as well for the sign he brought in there, which I thought was inappropriate, and it wasn't the right place to do so. But at the same time, dozens of lies. Even you self-admittedly said that most of the stuff that Donald Trump said you didn't agree with or you didn't.
Right.
It was dozens of lies. It was an embarrassment. And David, the most important part, whether you agree or disagree with Democrats that were standing up or not, is this. Can you define to me or say that there are any independents or people out there that are going to vote Republican in 2026 in the midterms because of what took place last night? Because I can't.
No, well, look, I don't think State of the Unions have a particularly large amount of sway. I mean,
Here's where the conversation shifts from emotional to strategic, and David does not even realize it is happening. The host sets up a question that sounds simple, but is actually a trap built from David's own logic. If not standing is disrespectful, if silence and stillness in that room means you do not care, then what does it mean when every single person in that room stands up and cheers because millions of people lost access to food assistance, people who were already struggling, people who needed that support to get through the month? The host asked David directly, "Was that disrespectful?" And David says yes, to a certain extent. He said it himself. You have to understand what just happened. David walked into this conversation with one mission, to paint one side as cold and uncaring, but by applying his own standard consistently, he ends up admitting that the other side was doing something disrespectful too, his own framework used against him, by him. That is not a debate loss. That is a self-inflicted collapse. There is also a moment here that I think is genuinely worth paying attention to, and it is something you do not see often enough in political commentary. The host lists the people on his own side that he criticized by name, specifically. He did not say my side was perfect. He said this person went too far, this other person's approach was wrong, that sign was inappropriate for that setting. He was specific and direct. And here is why that matters. Intellectual honesty in debate is actually rare. Most people defend their entire side by default. But when someone can criticize their own team without losing their core position, that credibility becomes almost impossible to argue against. Historically, the most effective communicators have always been the ones willing to acknowledge nuance on their own side. It goes all the way back to how Lincoln framed arguments during a deeply divided era. Nuance is not weakness, it is armor. And then the host closes with a question that David simply cannot answer. Can you name a single independent voter who is going to shift their position going into the next major election because of what happened at that speech? David says no. He actually agrees. And that is the bottom line. All of the outrage, all of the standing and clapping and not standing and not clapping, none of it moved a single persuadable voter. On the side that was supposedly being disrespectful saw the whole thing for what it was and chose not to participate. And by the end of this call, even David cannot argue that it cost them anything. That is not just winning an argument. That is knowing the game well enough not to be played by it. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.